my breaking point, when pain took over my life. It wasn't just the pain, it was the slow, invisible theft of my life. At first, I brushed it off. A little stiffness in the morning? That's normal at my age, I told myself. Everyone feels a bit creaky after a long walk or standing too long in the kitchen, right? But deep down, I knew something was changing. My knees had started to feel like rusty hinges. My hands ached when I tried to open jars. Climbing stairs felt like I was dragging sandbags. But what really caught me off guard was the constant nagging ache in my hips that never seemed to go away. I didn't want to admit it. Not to my family, not to my friends, not even to myself. I kept going, pushing through the discomfort. Smiling. At dinners, pretending I was fine at church, laughing off suggestions to take it easy. But the truth was, my body was crying for help, and I wasn't listening. It was a slow, creeping loss. I stopped going on walks with my granddaughter because I didn't want her to see me wincing with every step. I avoided social gatherings because I was afraid someone would notice me limping or needing extra support just to get out of a chair. I remember one particular day when I dropped my favorite coffee mug. My fingers just couldn't grip it tightly enough. That little crash on the kitchen floor sounded like a thunderclap in my heart. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't just joint pain. This was a loss of freedom, and it wasn't just physical. The emotional weight was heavier than I ever expected. I found myself becoming more withdrawn. I didn't want to be seen as fragile, as someone who needed help. But inside, I was grieving. Grieving for the version of me who used to dance without fear, kneel in the garden, climb ladders to hang Christmas lights. All those simple joys began to feel like distant memories. Doctors gave me the usual responses. It's age-related, they said. Wear and tear. They handed me prescriptions, anti-inflammatories, and sometimes stronger medications. For a while, I followed their orders, but the pills didn't fix the problem. They just masked it. And worse, I began noticing side effects. Stomach pain, foggy thinking, and a gnawing feeling that I was becoming dependent on something that wasn't truly healing me. The breaking point came one cold winter morning. I woke up and couldn't get out of bed. The pain in my joints was so severe that I literally cried. Not a tear or two, deep, gut-wrenching sobs. It wasn't just about the pain, it was about the fear. Fear that I would be stuck this way. Fear that I was slowly becoming a burden. Fear that my best days were behind me. That morning, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I knew something had to change. I couldn't go on like this. I had always believed in the body's ability to heal, but somewhere along the way, I had lost touch with that belief. I had handed over my hope to pills and diagnoses, and in return, I got temporary relief and a growing sense of helplessness. That was the moment I decided to take back control, not just of my health, but of my story. I didn't know how, and I certainly didn't have all the answers, but I made a silent promise to myself. I would find a way to heal naturally. I would explore every path, every remedy, every ancient tradition and modern method that honored the body's ability to recover. Didn't tell anyone right away. This was personal. This was about reclaiming something that had been slipping through my fingers for years. It was about becoming an active participant in my healing instead of a passive recipient of prescriptions. That decision, made in the quiet of a painful, tearful morning, became the first spark of hope I'd felt in a long time. And that spark was about to ignite something much bigger than I ever imagined, because what I learned next didn't just help me walk better, it helped me live better. The turning point, why I chose the natural path after that morning, the one where I couldn't get out of bed, I knew I was at a crossroads. I could keep doing what I'd been doing, keep popping pills, numbing the pain, and pretending that was enough. Or I could finally listen to what my body had been trying to tell me for years. Something needs to change. But let me be honest. Choosing the natural path didn't come instantly. It wasn't like I jumped up and declared, "I'm going all natural." No, I was scared. I was doubtful. And more than anything, I was exhausted. From the pain, yes, but also from the trial and error cycle I'd been living in. Doctors, medications, short-lived solutions. The idea of starting over with something new felt overwhelming. But there was also this quiet voice inside me, one I hadn't heard in a long time, that kept saying, "What if there's another way?" That voice grew louder when I stumbled across an old journal I'd kept during my 20s. I had completely forgotten about it. Flipping through the pages, I saw a younger version of myself, so full of energy and life, writing about long hikes, early morning yoga, and herbal teas I used to drink after workouts. I barely recognized that person, but I missed them. And then something clicked. I realized that I hadn't always been disconnected from my body. In fact, I used to have such a deep connection with it. I used to trust it, and it trusted me. I used to believe in food as medicine, in movement as therapy, in rest as recovery. Life had just gotten busy, noisy, and cluttered over the years. Somewhere between raising kids, working long hours, and handling everyday stress, I had lost touch with that version of me. So I began doing something I hadn't done in a long time. I started listening again. I listened to podcasts, read books, watched documentaries, anything I could find about natural joint health, anti-inflammatory diets, herbal remedies, ancient practices like Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine. I wasn't looking for a miracle. I just wanted a sign, some shred of evidence that it was possible to reduce pain and inflammation without relying on chemicals or surgeries. And I found it, not all at once, and not in some flashy headline or miracle cure ad, but in little stories like mine. Real people who had reversed their joint pain by changing what they ate, how they moved, how they slept, and even how they thought. I remember one story in particular, a woman in her 70s who had nearly lost the ability to walk because of her arthritis. She didn't go the conventional route. Instead, she focused on healing her gut, eliminating certain foods, and incorporating turmeric, omega-3s, and gentle yoga into her life. Within a year, she was hiking again. "Hiking!" I cried, reading that. Not because I was jealous, but because I felt hope. For the first time in a long time, I believed I could turn things around, not just manage symptoms, but actually begin to heal. That was the day I decided I was going to walk the natural path, fully, intentionally, not just dipping my toes in. I was going all in, not because I was anti-medicine, but because I was pro-healing, because I wanted to get to the root, not just treat the branch. It started with small things. I swapped out the processed food for fresh, whole ingredients. I added anti-inflammatory spices like turmeric and ginger to my meals. I began drinking warm lemon water in the mornings to help with inflammation and digestion. I cut back on sugar. Oh, that was hard. But I knew it was feeding the pain. I started moving again gently, not aggressively. I wasn't trying to push through anything anymore. That old mindset had gotten me nowhere. Instead, I did stretches, restorative yoga, and slow walks in the sunlight. Sometimes just 5 minutes. But I moved with love, not punishment, and I learned to rest, real rest. Not scrolling on my phone or half-watching TV while stressing about bills. I mean deep, mindful rest. Breathing exercises, quiet time, listening to soft music or the birds outside my window. I stopped seeing rest as weakness and started honoring it as part of healing. One of the biggest shifts, though, was emotional. I started being kinder to myself. I stopped blaming my body and started thanking it. Even in pain, it was still carrying me, still trying to protect me. That realization was powerful. I didn't need to fight my body. I needed to support it. And that's when the shift began. Not overnight, not dramatically, but steadily. I started waking up with less stiffness. The sharp pains turned dull. The swelling in my fingers started to fade. I could walk longer without limping. I could lift things again. Even my sleep improved, which made everything else feel easier. But the most beautiful part? I felt connected again. Connected to my body, to nature, to peace, to purpose. Choosing the natural path wasn't just about reversing joint pain, it was about returning home to myself, reclaiming my power, realizing that the answers weren't always out there. They were within me, waiting for me to slow down, to listen, and to act. And I'm not saying it was easy. It took effort, patience, and a lot of unlearning. But it was worth every step. Because when you feel yourself truly healing, not just coping, but actually improving, it changes everything. It gives you your life back. And that's exactly what I was beginning to feel. Nature's medicine cabinet. What really worked for me? When I first made the decision to heal naturally, I didn't know where to begin. It felt like standing at the edge of a vast forest with no map, no compass, just a deep hope that if I walked carefully and listened closely, the forest itself would guide me. And you know what? It did. I started by focusing on one simple idea. Food is medicine. I had heard that phrase before, but I never truly understood it until I felt it working in my own body. I began researching natural anti-inflammatories, and over time, I built what I now call my Nature's Medicine Cabinet, a collection of powerful foods, herbs, and remedies that didn't just mask my joint pain, but began to reverse it. The first star ingredient I discovered was turmeric. I read study after study about its anti-inflammatory compound, curcumin, and how it had helped people with arthritis reduce pain and swelling. So I bought an organic turmeric powder, mixed it with a bit of black pepper to help absorption, and began adding it to my morning tea and soups. Within weeks, something started to shift. My knees weren't screaming at me first thing in the morning. They still whispered, but the volume had gone down. Alongside turmeric, I introduced ginger, another root with incredible pain-relieving properties. I grated it fresh into hot water with lemon and honey, turning it into a soothing tea that became part of my daily ritual. That drink didn't just warm my body, it comforted my spirit. Next, I turned my attention to omega-3 fatty acids. I learned how they reduce inflammation at the cellular level. I started eating more flax seeds, chia seeds, and wild-caught salmon. And for extra support, I added a high-quality fish oil supplement to my routine. The stiffness in my fingers began to ease, and I could once again button my blouse without wincing. But the magic wasn't just in what I added, it was also in what I removed. I cut back heavily on processed sugars and refined carbs. That was tough, I won't lie. Sugar had been a comfort food for me in difficult times, but once I read how sugar spikes inflammation, I knew I had to let it go. I swapped sweets for fruits, white bread for whole grains, and processed snacks for raw nuts and seeds. The difference was astonishing. Within a couple of weeks, the swelling in my knuckles reduced, and the ache became more manageable. Another unexpected ally in my journey was bone broth. A dear friend suggested I try it for joint support, and I'm so glad I listened. Rich in collagen, glucosamine, and minerals, bone broth became a staple in my diet. I sipped it in the evenings, and I genuinely believe it helped rebuild the cushion in my joints. It also calmed my gut, which I later realized was deeply connected to my overall inflammation. Speaking of the gut, healing mine became a top priority. I didn't know this when I started, but so much of our immune response and inflammation is tied to gut health. I added fermented foods like sauerkraut and kefir to my meals and started taking a high-quality probiotic supplement. Over time, not only did my digestion improve, but my joint pain began to lessen too. It was as if my body was finally able to absorb and utilize all the healing nutrients I was feeding it. But nutrition was only part of the puzzle. I also turned to herbal remedies. Boswellia, often called Indian frankincense, became one of my favorite discoveries. It's been used for centuries for arthritis, and after a few weeks of taking it in capsule form, I noticed less pain during movement. I paired it with devil's claw, another potent herb for joint pain, especially in the back and hips. Epsom salt baths became a sacred ritual. A few times a week, I would soak in warm water mixed with Epsom salts and a few drops of lavender oil. The magnesium helped reduce inflammation and relax my muscles, while the quiet time gave me a chance to breathe, reflect, and heal on a deeper level. Then there was movement, gentle, intentional, and consistent. I didn't force myself into strenuous workouts. I focused on low-impact exercises like walking, Tai Chi, and simple stretches. I started doing joint-friendly yoga poses I found online, just 10 minutes a day, and those few minutes transformed how my body felt. My joints became more mobile, and my confidence started to return. I also embraced natural sunlight. I made it a point to sit outside in the early morning or late afternoon to soak in vitamin D, which plays a crucial role in bone and joint health. Not only did my mood improve, but I also felt stronger, more energized. The simple act of connecting with nature gave me a sense of harmony and peace I had been missing for years. Perhaps one of the most surprising tools I added to my medicine cabinet was meditation and breathwork. At first, I thought it was too woo-woo for me, but I was wrong. The more I practiced slow, conscious breathing, the more I noticed a reduction in my stress, and with it, a decrease in flare-ups. Chronic pain and chronic stress are close friends, and by calming my mind, I was calming my body too. Over time, my cabinet became more than just a collection of remedies. It became a symbol of self-care, self-trust, and self-healing. Every time I opened a jar of turmeric or brewed a ginger tea, I was telling my body, I believe in you, I'm here for you. Let's heal together. And my body responded. Was it a miracle overnight cure? No. But step by step, remedy by remedy, choice by choice, I watched myself come back to life. I watched the pain shrink. I watched hope grow. I learned that nature doesn't rush. It doesn't promise instant relief, but it offers something far more powerful, real healing, rooted in balance, guided by wisdom, and proven by centuries of human experience. This is what worked for me. These were my tools, my medicines, my anchors. And while every journey is different, I believe that somewhere in nature's cabinet there's a key for everyone. The daily rituals that changed everything. Healing wasn't something that happened in a moment. It didn't come from a single superfood or a special supplement. It came from something much quieter, much simpler. Ritual. When I first began walking, this natural path, I thought the big changes would come from the big actions. I thought healing would arrive like a thunderclap, quick and dramatic. But what I discovered instead was this. The most powerful changes came from the small, consistent things I did every single day. They became my anchors, rituals that gently rewired my body and spirit toward balance, peace, and health. And over time, these little habits transformed my life. It began with how I woke up. Before, I used to roll out of bed stiff and sore, already dreading the day. But I decided to change that. Now, when I open my eyes, I take just 60 seconds to breathe, deeply. I put one hand over my heart and the other on my belly. I give thanks for another morning, for another chance to move forward. That simple act of gratitude and breath sets the tone for everything that follows. Next comes my morning joint ritual. Before I even leave the bedroom, I do a 5-minute stretch routine I created for myself. Gentle movements, ankle circles, wrist rolls, shoulder shrugs, neck tilts. It gets my blood flowing and reminds my joints, We're going to move today, and we're going to do it gently, together. I then drink my healing tonic. It's a warm glass of water with fresh lemon juice, a pinch of turmeric, a slice of ginger, and a dash of black pepper. Sometimes I add a bit of honey. It's not just a health drink. It's a moment of quiet presence. I drink it slowly as the sun rises, and I let it wake up my body from the inside out. Breakfast used to be toast or cereal, fast, carb-heavy, and mindless. Now it's a conscious act. I prepare something that supports my joints and my energy. Scrambled, eggs with spinach, a smoothie with flax seeds, berries, and almond milk, or steel-cut oats with cinnamon and walnuts. Every bite reminds me, food is medicine, and I'm feeding my healing. One of the biggest shifts came when I started building movement into my day, not just as exercise, but as sacred time. I no longer work out. I move. That might be a 15-minute yoga session in the living room with soft music playing, or a walk around the block, breathing in the crisp air and noticing the trees, or simple stretching during TV commercials. Movement became less about pushing and more about listening to what my joints needed that day. Mid-mornings became my time for sun and silence. I'd take a cup of herbal tea, maybe nettle or chamomile, outside and just sit. No phone, no to-do list, just the warmth on my skin and the quiet hum of nature. It became a powerful moment of stress relief. And the more I calmed my nervous system, the more I noticed my body responding with ease and less tension. Another ritual that changed everything was my midday check-in. I'd pause, usually before lunch, and ask myself two simple questions. How am I feeling? And what do I need? Maybe I needed to rest. Maybe I needed a nutritious meal or a quick walk. Sometimes I just needed to lie down for 10 minutes with soft music and let my joints relax. Lunch and dinner were also transformed. I didn't just eat healthier, I ate slower. I started chewing my food thoroughly, putting my fork down between bites, and noticing how my body reacted to each meal. Digestion improved, and I realized that slowing down was one of the best forms of medicine I'd overlooked for years. In the afternoon, I carved out time for joint self-care. This was when I'd do things like massage my knees and fingers with warm castor oil or arnica balm, or soak my feet in Epsom salts. I'd sometimes use a heating pad on my back while reading a book. These moments weren't just physical, they were emotional. I was caring for my body with love and attention, not frustration and resentment. Evenings became my time for release. I stopped watching stressful news before bed. Instead, I'd light a candle, put on calming music, and do 10 minutes of deep breathing or meditation. Some nights I'd write in a journal, not pages and pages, just a few lines. Something I was grateful for, something I was proud of, something I hoped for. That small act helped me fall asleep with peace instead of worry. Sleep itself became a non-negotiable ritual. I made my bedroom a sanctuary. No bright lights, no loud TV, just soft bedding, a lavender diffuser, and silence. I went to bed at the same time each night and allowed my body to rest deeply, knowing that rest is when real healing happens. Throughout the day, I also added what I call micro moments of joy. I'd watch birds outside my window. I'd call a friend just to laugh. I'd play my favorite old songs and sway gently while folding laundry. These small joys lifted my spirit, and when the spirit is lifted, the body feels it too. All of these rituals, none of them dramatic, none of them expensive, became the architecture of my healing. They reminded me daily that I am not broken, that I am still whole, still capable, still alive. That healing is not a destination, but a rhythm, a way of living with intention, presence, and care. When I first began, I thought I'd have to do everything perfectly. But the truth is, consistency matters more than perfection. I missed days. I had setbacks. But I kept returning to my rituals like a gentle dance, always coming back to the rhythm, even when I stumbled. And that's what I want others to understand. Healing isn't about doing everything right. It's about creating space every single day to love your body through its pain, to treat it not as a problem to be fixed, but as a friend who needs support, softness, and strength. These daily rituals didn't just help me reverse joint pain, they helped me remember who I am, not just someone managing a condition, but someone actively creating a life of intention, healing, and quiet power. Freedom in motion. Living pain-free. Again. There was a moment, clear as day, when I realized something had changed. I was out in the garden, pulling a few stubborn weeds that had taken root between the rose bushes. The sun was warm on my back, and I stood up, expecting that familiar pinch in my knees and that tight ache in my lower back. But it didn't come. I paused, confused. I stretched lightly from side to side. Still nothing. No pain, just movement, just breath, just life. Stood there for a long time, longer than I needed to. I let that moment sink into my bones, not just because I was physically pain-free, but because for the first time in years, I felt free. Freedom in motion. That's the phrase that echoed in my heart. I didn't just want to survive my joint pain, I wanted to outgrow it. And through every conscious choice, every ritual, every day of listening to my body, I had found something deeper than I ever expected. A life no longer ruled by pain. Now, let me be honest. I'm not claiming I became a professional athlete or started running marathons. That wasn't my goal. My goal was to reclaim the simple things: walking without stiffness, rising from a chair without wincing, climbing stairs without gripping the railing like my life depended on it. And yes, bending down in my garden without feeling like I needed a crane to get back up. And I did all of that, not with prescriptions, not with surgeries, but with nature, patience, and belief in my body's ability to heal. Today, movement has become my joy, not my burden. I take morning walks in the park again, sometimes barefoot in the grass when the weather allows. The way the earth feels beneath my feet, cool, grounding, alive, it reminds me that healing doesn't come from isolation, but connection. Connection to nature, connection to my body, connection to the present. I started dancing again, too. Not on a stage, not for anyone else. Just in my living room, where I turn on a favorite song and let my body move in whatever way it wants. Sometimes it's graceful, sometimes clumsy, but always full of gratitude. Because for years, I was afraid to move. Now I celebrate it. I've even returned to hobbies I had given up. Knitting used to be impossible because of the pain in my fingers. But with the inflammation gone, I picked up my yarn again. The first scarf I made was lopsided and full of mistakes, but I wore it proudly, because every stitch represented resilience. Cooking, gardening, even cleaning the house, activities that used to feel overwhelming now feel like choices, not chores. I no longer ration my energy, saving it only for important tasks. Now I use it joyfully, because I know I can. More importantly, I found emotional freedom. When you live with chronic pain, it's not just your body that suffers. It's your mind, your relationships, your confidence. There were days when I felt like a burden to my family. Days I said no to invitations, not because I didn't want to go, but because I feared the pain would flare up halfway through. But now I say yes more often. Yes to dinners out. Yes to long walks on the beach. Yes to spontaneous road trips with my grandkids. I no longer live in fear of what my joints will or won't allow. I live in alignment with what I choose. The people around me have noticed too. Friends who hadn't seen me in months started saying, "You look lighter," or "There's something different about you. What are you doing?" And when I tell them it wasn't a new drug or surgery, but rather a new way of living, They listen. Some of them have even started their own journeys toward natural healing. And that, to me, is the most powerful part of all this. Not just healing for myself, but becoming a living example of what's possible. If you're reading this and you're still in the thick of it, still waking up in pain, still feeling like your joints are in charge of your life, I want you to know something. You are not broken. You are not too old, and it is not too late. Your body is listening. It always has been. Sometimes all it takes is for us to start listening back, to slow down, tune in, and respond with care instead of frustration. You don't need to fix everything at once. You don't need to be perfect. Just start somewhere, anywhere. A 5-minute walk, a cup of healing tea, a single stretch, a conscious breath. Healing doesn't always look like a straight line. There will be days of progress, and there will be setbacks. I had plenty, but I kept showing up. I kept choosing love over fear. And, slowly, the scales tipped. Now, pain is no longer the narrator of my story. I am, and my story is one of return. Return to movement, return to joy, return to myself. This journey taught me that healing isn't about erasing pain. It's about reclaiming life in all its colors. It's about dancing even when the rhythm is slow, walking even when the path isn't straight, and believing that the body you live in can become your ally, not your enemy. So when I walk now, whether it's through the park, down the aisle of the grocery store, or just to the mailbox, I carry more than just groceries or letters. I carry hope. And I want you to know, if I can do this, so can you. You don't need to find the perfect supplement or read every article online. Start by trusting yourself. Trust that your body wants to heal. Trust that nature holds the answers. And trust that the small steps you take today will lead to a freedom you can feel in your bones. I used to think pain-free meant rare, lucky, or unrealistic. Now it's my daily reality, and every time I move without pain, I celebrate, not with fireworks, but with presence, because freedom in motion is the greatest gift I've ever received.